I'm still figuring this place out, but I think a bunch of guys like us should team up.
So I think nowadays pretty much every studio is trying to establish their own cinematic universe. But back in 2008, it was a pretty crazy idea, and no one knew if it was even gonna work. But it did, and Marvel changed the box office landscape forever, building up one interconnected story to the next, with 22 features that spanned over 10 years, and ending with a truly epic finale. Avengers Endgame had grossed $2.79 billion, reaching box office heights never before seen. Oh wait, there's Avatar. So what happened here? Because Marvel created this insane buildup of a giant cohesive storyline across multiple films into this one epic crescendo. And then this, one standalone film with an original IP, grossed $124 million more. How the hell did Avatar gross this much money? Well, there's something for everyone. Wait, hold on, that's stupid. Let me start over. Why was Avatar so wildly successful? Well, for one, it's epic, and when I say epic, I don't mean it as an adjective, but as in two specific things. One of them is this.
The thing that strikes me about Dune is that it's truly epic. And when I use the word epic, I'm using it in a very specific way, meaning like a David Lean film, or to a very large extent like the Lord of the Rings films. But when I think of films that have epic events in them, like let's say a Marvel Universe film where whole cities get destroyed and so on, they don't feel epic.
Any studio these days can go to any number of VFX houses and get shots like this. But to really sculpt that grand epic frame, you need more than just money. This is a scene from Lord of the Rings that really encapsulates this feeling of an epic adventure.
But you seem to have the discipline, the vocabulary of actual epic filmmaking, that kind of grand proscenium frame that's just presented and takes its time with the music and so on.
Behold, the great realm and dwarf city of Dwarrowdale.
Well, there's an eye-opener and no mistake.
In the book Anatomy of Genres, John Truby writes that an epic is classically defined as the story of an individual or family whose actions determine the fate of the nation. Jake's actions in Avatar determine the fate of not just the Na'vi, but also of Pandora. And combined with James Cameron's directorial vision, you get a truly colossal sense of scale, not just in the story, but also on the screen as well. Avatar is truly an epic, but it's also a bunch of other things, because in order for films to typically do well at a modern day box office, they need to transcend their genres. Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight is famously a superhero crime epic. Lord of the Rings is a myth-based fantasy epic, Inception is a science fiction heist, and Avatar is a myth-based science fiction epic. And it's also this. Another reason why Avatar is so compelling is its use of romance as a subgenre. Jake and Neytiri start off at odds with each other,
but stupid, ignorant like a child.
Then they slowly warm up, start to flirt, then eventually fall in love. And as they fall in love with each other, we fall in love with them, and in turn fall in love with Pandora. So when something tragic happens, we really feel it at scale.
Get away! Get away from here! Never come back!
When romance is added into the mix, it dials your emotional investment to an insane level. Just take a look at Titanic. It has a number 4 spot in lifetime gross because of how deeply the romance elevates the dramatic nature of the spectacle. And it's not just the romance either, it's also the fantasy. And I'm not talking about the genre. So about a year ago, I did a script exchange with a friend, and while our stories were very different genres, we both had this very similar story beat, where a woman comes into the life of the hero and helps steer them into becoming their full self. Which got me thinking, I think there's a reason why these types of tropes exist. It's a collective shared fantasy that often transcends cultural barriers. They're a part of the human condition, which makes them a part of us, and in typical James Cameron fashion, Avatar is right full of them. Now, there are many different types of tropes, but typically the most popular ones fulfill some type of innate fantasy. There's the forbidden love trope.
You mated with this woman?
Oh, shit.
And there's the chosen one trope, which is often a precursor to the undiscovered underdog trope. This is when you have a hero who is essentially a nobody, but when they are sent to a new world, their undiscovered talents become recognized, which raises their status amongst their peers.
You know, for reasons I cannot fathom, the Omatikai have chosen you.
This also happens in The Queen's Gambit.
Is your match over?
Yes, I won.
That was fast.
And in Harry Potter.
Wow.
And then there's the male trope I talked about in the beginning, where the hero meets a woman by circumstance and then helps them develop as a character. This is a common male fantasy trope that expresses a desire to live up to your full potential, and while Avatar is your typical male hero's journey story, it does have something for everyone. Because after my script exchange, I started thinking about other tropes, and one of the things I realized is there's one trope that's fairly popular with women. Love triangles. You have a love triangle in Twilight.
Doesn't he own a shirt?
You have one in The Hunger Games, and most recently there's a love triangle in Wednesday.
Didn't mean to interrupt. You're not.
You got one in the first season of Shadow and Bone, and then when that was over, they shoehorn in another one in season 2. And they would have probably done the same for Wednesday if it wasn't for Jenna putting her foot down. But there's a very long list of films and shows out there with this exact trope exactly because of how popular it is, which includes Avatar. And also Titanic. Now, it isn't exactly a major part of the story in Avatar, but damn, James Cameron has this down to an exact science. But it's not just genres and tropes either, because it's not like there aren't countless other films that have done this exact same thing. You have to give audiences an experience they've never seen before. So I want to tell you guys about a certain VFX house that completely changed the game forever. They pioneered new tech with new capture techniques under a visionary director that gave audiences something they've never seen before, that elevated film to a whole new level. And with their expertise, they helped usher in a truly immersive and novel film that was a myth-based science fiction epic with a huge leap in technology that dazzled audiences all around the world. And while Weta did accomplish all of this, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about
Industrial, light, and magic.
And I'm not talking about Avatar. I'm talking about when George Lucas set out to make Star Wars, he had two things in mind. One was this.
I thought spaceships, dogfights in space, that's a great idea.
And the other was,
I was just searching for a story, and then I thought mythology. The idea that a society creates heroes that they can admire. I could see it as a mechanism, a universal reality.
So it seems like there's a recurring theme going on.
In only 9 days, Star Wars has grossed more money than any movie in Dallas history.
Every time there's a myth-based science fiction epic with a huge leap in filmmaking technology, something magical happens.
If the movie continues to draw the crowds and money it has during these early weeks, the North Park theater manager says Star Wars will go on to break all existing motion picture records.
I think another film that sort of captures this same combination of things is The Matrix, which is also a myth-based science fiction film, and its fight scenes back then were insanely groundbreaking. I vividly remember I was rewatching it over and over again on VHS. There was just something about this combination of things that when put together in a cocktail, you can't help but make something special. Also, on a side note, there was a brief love triangle in Star Wars. Until, you know, this happened.
He's my brother.
But wait, hold on a second. Let's back up a bit. What exactly is a myth-based story? The myth genre is essentially the human consciousness in story form. They're stories the mind creates in order to make sense of life's big problems. In John Truby's Anatomy of Genres, which this entire section is based on, he has a whole chapter dissecting the myth story structure. It's fairly detailed and long, so here's a simplified rundown. It's a genre that focuses on the life cycle, It often is circular, where the hero goes on a long journey only to find they had already possessed what they wanted all along. And it's often about searching for one's destiny and immortality. And I think this is why the genre is such a key aspect in capturing a worldwide audience. Because coming to terms with your own mortality is a shared human experience. The Epic of Gilgamesh, which is the first ever myth, is famously about a quest for immortality. And at the end of the hero's journey, he eventually comes to accept his own finite life and realize everything he'd wanted he had already possessed all along. And so these stories serve as a warm blanket to stave off the anxiety of death in a similar way that religion can, because most religions are essentially a collection of myths designed to lay out the moral framework needed to achieve immortality. Here are some examples of the myth genre in film. But there is something about Avatar that sets it apart from the others.
Even though Avatar has some story elements that I think are a little silly, more importantly, it goes from a male myth to a female myth. Actually, female myth was a very popular story form until about 3,000 years ago, when it was wiped out, because female myth cultures were wiped out by male myth cultures. It's only in the last, really 10 years, that the female myth has started to come back in Western culture. And it is coming back strong. And the film that started it is Avatar.
Now, there's a few things that sets the female myth apart from its male counterpart, but John Truby boils it down to essentially one thing. The male myth is to divide and conquer, and the female myth is to combine and grow. There aren't as many female myths in film, but here are a few of them.
Fundamental thing you have to understand is the way they handle conflict. The female myth story is about how to diffuse conflict so that we have the least amount of conflict possible. Take a look at any of those, break them down, look to see how they handle, you still got the journey of the hero, but look how they handle conflict with various opponents along the path. Totally different approach.
While male myths are based on the hunt, female myths are based on the agricultural cycle. It's about rebirth and growth. Avatar has a number of scenes that portray this.
One life ends, another begins.
Now, John also writes about how the story of Jesus Christ, seen through the lens of genre and structure, is essentially a female myth fantasy. And I think there's some connection with this and Avatar's worldwide appeal, but I think this is a good place to end this segment, considering we can keep going on and on forever on this topic. So if you want to go further into this, I'd suggest just checking out the book for yourself. But at the end of the film, Jake has one final rebirth, and the story leaves us with the myth of Avatar. In order for us to achieve immortality, City must learn to live in harmony with the natural world. And I think this is the magic of Avatar. And I'm not talking about just the myth, I'm talking about everything collectively. When companies use the slogan, "There's something for everyone," I usually instinctively stay away from the product, but I think that's a perfect way to describe Avatar's phenomenon. Because it captured something about the human condition at a truly epic scale that was so incredibly immersive it depressed people afterwards. And I remember being in high school at the time when Avatar first came out. I watched it 5 times in theaters, but I've always wondered why it captivated me as much as it did. And I think it's because when you take an epic story, present it in an epic fashion, fulfill the strongest innate human fantasies and desires, mix in a huge leap in filmmaking technology, and then build all these ingredients around a universal human story construct, you get this. So why was Avatar so wildly successful? Well, I guess there's something for everyone. What do you know? I guess it was the first answer all along.